Here we are at our Central Elementary second grade professional learning community. I am Shauna Patton, and I am our district assessment coordinator, but also I am a part of the Future Ready Assessment Initiative through KVEC, and they actually charged us with coming up with a through course task video, as the second grade here at Central Elementary is facilitating the task, and you guys have worked very hard to prepare for that. So with us today we have Charlene Owens. She is a grant recipient with ARI, and she is also a QFT trainer and participant. Here we have Angie Hall, and Angie is a AR and ARI grant recipient and a presenter. He did a really good job at the summit. We have Mr. Cochran, Tom Cochran. He is the principal here at Central Elementary. And we have Robin Hyden, and she is also a second grade teacher here, a grant recipient, and an ARI Leadership Lab mentor. So I know you've worked hard on this, getting the kids ready to do their part of the task individually tomorrow. So Charlene, we're blessed to have Charlene at the school, as you know, because she actually helped write some of the questions at the state level. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Charlene, and you can guide this PLC today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. I have already led a PLC with the upper grades, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, so I'm just going to kind of lead you all the way that we did. We developed some documents during those PLCs that kind of helped us, so I want to kind of go through that with you too. I pulled your annotation up for the germinating seeds and looked at the actual phenomenon that it's given us, and it's about germinating seeds. So I highlighted the DCIs, the CCCs, and the SCPs, and then looked at the overall intent. And from that, I think our planning worksheet will work well to pick those out. And I've kind of put those together already using the appendices, but I think we should look at that again to make sure that we're on track with that.
Okay.
The overall intent of this germinating seeds TCT says the overall intent of this task is to elicit evidence that students can make a claim and support the claim with evidence from patterns in the data that has been analyzed. In that, I see some practices and some cross-cutting concepts. Now, the content related here is within your content, but it doesn't necessarily show that the intent is to assess that content, but instead those cross-cutting concepts and those SEPs, okay? So to look at those, I think we need to look at this planning sheet, and the one that I have filled in, it says your DCI, SEP, and CCC. Now, we have with us these sheets here that this comes straight from nextgenscience.org, where I pull up, we find our standards, and it says plants depend on water and light to grow, which is a good way to think of as a claim that we are going to overall want the students to make from analyzing the data and then being able to explain it. And that's basically our intent. When we look at our cross-cutting concept of patterns, we cannot forget that patterns look different for kindergarten than they do for 8th grade, for example. So we find K2 in this first band, and here it says children recognize that patterns in the natural and human design world can be observed and used to describe phenomena and evidence, and that goes right along with the intent. So that's what we're looking for, is those patterns. So we got to make sure that that's what we're seeing in this. So then the next part, I also put in cause and effect there, because it goes right along with the patterns. It says students learn that events have causes that generate observable patterns. That could be something that will show up in their answers, I believe, as well. And then we have the SEP. And our SEP here is analyzing and interpreting data and constructing explanations, which I feel like is going to look very different from what I'm used to in the 6th grade with what you guys do. So this is where I feel like you all will need to come in and we'll see what you're seeing in the classroom and what you've already done. It'll should lead us up to this TCT. The SEP here has for analyzing data things like record information, use and share pictures. This goes along, and drawings. This is what they do when they get to see the data of the germinating seeds.
Right.
And then here we have constructing explanations. And they will construct an evidence-based account for natural phenomena. The natural phenomena being that these seeds are going to sprout. So I think those are the things that we need to look at and make sure that we can see that they're doing as the intent. So we have to look at what do the students need to know to do this task. So look at that, we'll look at the task that says, the actual task that we got from SharePoint there. What does Sam's data tell you about his seeds needed to germinate? And in this, they gave us the scenario that Sam had these seeds and that they put them in the bag with the water and the paper and they put one in the sunlight and one without. And you all have done that in the classroom, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so they'll have that memory, so you can bring that about. And maybe even as you're given this task, I think it wouldn't be bad to prompt their memory from just seeing these. I think they need to be in pictures, so we could either in color, so you could either print those in color or even pull them up on your screen and let them see, and then remind them, because they'll need to see the color. I think of
That way they
those.
can see the different parts of the seeds.
Right, because it's not clear in black and white. But if you actually show them that to remind them, you know, this is what we did, I feel like that will trigger that and remember that, and they'll actually have that hands-on, natural thought process.
It'll prompt their thinking too, because they'll remember when they did that in your classroom, and the color is a good idea.
Right.
Yes.
I think that would be a real important for them. So they need to know about seed germination here, but at the same time, that's really not the intent of them to tell us exactly how much they know, but how much they know from analyzing that data. So we've got to think of it that way. So some questions I put here that students would need to know is how to analyze data and compare models. And this was something that, as you've done and taught your science lessons through STEM scopes, and as you've done with the already done activities like this, they should have seen the data, and you'll be able to bring that back to their knowledge if they're struggling with what do you mean analyze data. It may just be the vocabulary even. So that's some things you can look at, some questions they might have. What does that mean? Analyze. What does that mean, the data? And that's where we can come with some of our prompting questions.
All the vocabulary that's in this task, have you guys already gone over that before with them? So again, just that prompting, I think, will bring that back to their thinking.
Construct explanation using claim, evidence, and reasoning. Now, in the appendices, it does talk about them using evidence, and then in this question, it calls it a claim. And here they even have in parentheses, that's a statement. That is language that kids don't often get in second grade, I think, just because that's something that will come. So I see no problem in saying a statement or even your conclusion, or, you know, because you're wanting them to say what that DCI says, but you're wanting them to figure it out from the data. So I think that would be okay to say that, or to any prompting questions that make them come up with that claim or bring back to their memory. I think those are things that we can do. Now, that being said, during your facilitation, I think we need to record that in our facilitation check sheet, that what we have to prompt, what words we have to use to prompt, and that will help us as well as help know where they're at, or help us know what words we are using enough. I know, for example, in mine is the CCCs. I had students that didn't know the causal effect as much as I thought they should have, and that showed up right away during my facilitation, so I was able to say that's something I need to work on right there. besides individual
So
students.
you documented that that was something that you had to go back and talk to them about?
Yes, and I documented it per student even with our facilitation sheet. So if I had a student who asked me a question and it was about cause and effect, or it was, so I would even put my little CCC and jot down my question, and that would remind me of what it was. And when I go and look and I have more CCCs, I know I've got to start concentrating more on my cross-cutting concepts, because in reality we know that most DCIs can be found, that the practices need to be understood and learned, and the concepts have to be understood and learned. DCIs are content that you can really find anywhere. So if they get their SCPs and their CCCs, it's going to help a lot. So documenting that is very, very important, I think, during that for individual students. When you go to analyze their results, you can say, oh, I've had to prompt so many times for them to get this answer, or I prompted so many times and they still didn't get this answer. I know that student has their issue. Or if I didn't prompt any and they came right to it, it gives me an idea where that student is, and also lets me know where I'm at in my teaching with that.
Do you think too, by doing that it could help you with maybe some patterns that you're seeing with the students? So maybe some problems that they're having that maybe you hadn't picked up on before, and you can, when you are analyzing your own teaching, you can see, hey, they had some trouble here, maybe I need to go back, or maybe this is something that I didn't do like I should have.
Absolutely, and I'll use myself as an example again. I had dissolving rate, and they were a lot of students got confused on the word rate. That was looking at the speed of how fast they dissolved, and they were saying this one dissolves the fastest, and therefore it's the warmest, and they could tell me why some of them, but then they kept going, what's that word rate? And I realized I probably hadn't used the word rate like I should have, and then it told me right away. So those kinds of things. I think this is very valuable, and it goes right along with our the 3 steps that tells us that if we in that facilitation process, yes, it says anyway, if possible, ideally, it tells us that ideally we will keep track of those strategies and document what we're doing during the facilitation. And if we do that, it's going to help in our analysis so much.
Right.
Because I don't think there's a right or wrong way. And it says also in there to keep this not in a testing environment. We want this as a classroom learning environment. These should be more like our classroom embedded task than our test.
Yeah,
Remember what they told us?
It's not an assessment.
If it looks like a test, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And we want it to be a learning experience for them. And this documentation is seeing what they do and talking to the kids. They will tell us things back that they may not write even. So that's part of our formative with this, I think. So some things they need to know. Then we're going back to that, how to identify patterns. That's one of those things that we're actually looking at this task. That is part of the intent of this task. Can they find the patterns and use them as evidence and defend them? So some vocabulary, when reading the questions, I found they might need to understand to make sure that the words support, defend, claim, evidence, data, reasoning, conditions, some words that second graders might not just understand that really have nothing to do with that content. It's all the science relation. That's the words that we really need to find. And lots of times you'll find those science words given for them, like germination. They'll give them the definition, but they've got to understand what these mean. And I think we can support them by giving them alternative words for that if they need it.
I do think that's fine to do that.
Yes, and just document what you had to, because some words you'll find they know what this means, but they don't know what this means. So I put down here a few of those questions that they might come up with. Well, what does conditions mean? What does it mean, conditions? And it may be something that we just need to say. What are the things that we need to add to the seeds? They might not realize that conditions mean just the water and the sunlight. And we may have to prompt them that way just to get those words out. And if I did change anything about this, it would be something like that. But I think we should leave this the same and it'll take us to our intent. And then if we do have to change words, just document it as we go. One thing that I think that they may have questions with, and you all will know more than me, is some of the actual words like things that you all did in the germination process that you have. We're having to remind them that some of them are going to say, well, I don't remember what this did, or what about when this happened. We got to remember, we got to focus on that data that's on that sheet, because they are analyzing someone else's data. And I would have them let's pretend like this is our data. When we did that, let's pretend like we took these pictures and this was our data, and this is what came up, and now we're going back to that, because you're looking at analyzing data. Because it's easy to get off of that and look at it at the end and say, well, they don't understand why seeds germinate, but we got to know, can they analyze data more than that? And then can they explain it and support it with that data? So their claim will be that answer, and the evidence will be, well, I know because I see it here, and I can say what happened. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Any other questions that you all can think that they're going to ask about those things, or any that you can think them coming up with? I know in the annotation, as I read through it, some things I didn't think of that I'm sure someone will ask. Now that I look at it, will be things such as, then normally seeds grow in the ground. And didn't you say one of your students had said something like that? Like, well, seeds grow in the ground, what does that have to do with sunlight? So we may then have to bring in questions that bring something else in, because that may be the student that you need to go farther with, who might now understand that sunlight equals warmth, and it's the warmth that causes it. And that's the student who, even though we're looking at patterns here, that gets cause and effect too, that will go the extra. Whereas all second graders may not feel that, but somebody will.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, we're looking for those students who are going above and beyond as well. So those types of things. So we may have questions like that as well. Like, what about the seeds that we plant in the ground? I never lay my seeds in the windowsill to plant, or something. Some of them may know that. Some of them have seen a garden or something. So we can do things to relate that way too.
I think this has been very important and will prove to be very helpful when they complete this task
Yeah,
tomorrow.
the implementation of the task.